take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
I love watching people like bob their head once the music is going.
When there's music on, I'm always moving.
Angelica Blais, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
A woman of many hats.
That is how I describe myself.
Yeah, you got a lot of things going on.
I wear a lot of hats.
First and foremost, you were PhD student?
Yes, I'm a
okay, so
graduate
that's
student.
even like higher up than I thought. I was going to say master's, but I was like, wait, that can't be right.
No, PhD. Yeah.
So you're going to be a doctor.
a
when do we-
doctorate
doctorate,
of
when-
philosophy.
Is that what it's
Yeah.
considered?
Yeah.
So what are you at? You're studying...
Exercise psychology.
Right.
Yeah.
That fits under philosophy and not like
Well,
science?
a doctorate, technically PhD stands for a doctorate of philosophy, and you can do it for the
Oh!
PhD. Yeah. So,
Oh!
yeah. So you can do it in like basic science, but it's still a doctorate. Yeah.
I had... Look at that.
We learn something new
Today
every day.
I learned. Interesting. Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. Exercise psychology, like, how does one get into something like that? So, I mean, we've had a lot of people come on who are in fitness or personal training, and some level of health. How do you get into the psychology side of it? Because that seems like a much more heavier subject.
Right. My path, very not linear. I started with an interest. Actually, if we want to go really back to high school, I hated sports and anything to do with it, which is really ironic because now I promote sports and well-being and I teach sports, but hated it. I started with an interest in kinesiology and physiology and doing cardiac rehab. I actually did my internship at the Heart Institute here in Ottawa.
World renowned here in Ottawa, by the way.
World-renowned, world-class researchers. They're doing such great work.
And it's Heart Month, so it's all...
Yes.
You can go donate to that for sure.
There are lots of good organizations. The Heart Institute being one of the best.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
yeah.
Made
they
me
do
think of it.
really great programs. And really great, like, world-renowned research. So that was my fourth year. And then I was like, this is really cool. I really like cardiac rehab, but I've always been interested in working with kids. So I thought, okay, let's apply this to kids that live with different cardiac conditions, because I actually I was one of them. Like I grew up with a minor, like, congenital heart defect, and I thought, how neat, we can apply this to kids. And then when I actually got to that, I realized, oh, kids don't want to walk on a treadmill for 30 minutes at 70% of their heart rate max. That's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see them getting bored. Maybe if you
twice
stuck
a
an
week.
iPad right there in front
Maybe,
of them.
but still. Actually, yeah, maybe. But so with kids, the conversation changes more to physical activity and sport and getting them active those ways, rather than a traditional rehab model. So as I was doing my master's, that was what my master's focused on, I realized that it was less about the physiology behind it and more about how do we get them to actually participate in physical activity and sport. So that's where the psychology comes in, because it's why and how do people even start being active? Like, what are the
Right.
factors that influence them being active as kids? How can we encourage them to be active? If they have low confidence, it doesn't always have to be like that. How do we...
Right. Like there was always those people in gym that would want to sit out because they weren't quite up to par with like the jock
Right.
testosterone puberty boys.
Right.
Who would go super hard and dodgeball for no reason. Right.
Right.
I was one of those kids.
Yeah, and I was one of those kids that tripped and fell
Right.
all the time.
Get bullied and yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, okay, this girl's in basketball, she's getting every net and I'm getting none. Why am I doing this? Right? And part of it is, okay, I'm not getting any feedback that I can really use and improve, and I'm not getting any encouragement. I'm just seeing she's doing better than I'm doing. So
Right.
the psychology behind being active is super interesting. Like it's I see it as almost the first step.
Because I would think biologically, And I mean, I could be totally
Yeah.
wrong. This is an outsider's opinion, which I love to do on this podcast and just share my uneducated opinion. But you would think, as a kid, being active seems sort of natural in a way. Now, not necessarily going out and being really good at sports. I'm just talking about running around, playing outside.
Outdoor play.
Yeah, exactly. That seems to be innate.
Yes.
We live in society now where a lot of parents are just plopping down that said iPad we were talking about right in front of them and just kind of go play with that. And, I don't want to watch you outside. I don't want to go to the park. I want to just sit on Facebook while you're on Netflix on the phone.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that now a lot too?
That's one of the biggest problems
Interesting.
that we're dealing with, and why initiatives like Outdoor Play Canada and Participation, that's a lot of, and I know that's a pretty well-known name, Participation, but that's what they're really trying to get out of. And also, it might not just be that it's easier to put an iPad in front of them, but also conceptually it might be safer, because what if they go outside and they're climbing trees and they fall and they break something, right?
Right.
So there's this whole idea of risky play and how it actually is super beneficial for kids, for them to engage in these riskier types of activity. You're actually building strength, you're building endurance, you're developing motor skills by climbing trees, crossing rivers, jumping over creeks, like things that look like kind of your stomach come up to your throat when you watch.
Yeah, that goes to that kind of adage your mom would say, like, kids running around in the living room and you're like, what if he bonks his head? And then it's like, oh, well, he'll learn.
Yeah.
Is that's sort of like the whole...
And he's gaining more from running around and maneuvering himself in that living room environment than he would be if he was stopped from doing that, and more than the risk of hitting his head.
Right.
There's a ton of great stuff on risky play and great initiatives. And it does align a lot with the outdoor play. It's not my specialty. I do have great colleagues at GEO that research that and are involved in promoting that, but not particularly my area.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting.
Yeah. So your particular area, you're, trying to find out the psychology why maybe kids aren't active and seeing how you can reverse that, or?
That's a big project right there. That's like
You're basically
a
solving...
lifetime career.
Yeah.
So, and I actually look at physical literacy.
Okay.
So
it's good. That's a word I've never heard before.
Some people have, some people haven't, but we're really trying to get it out more. So physical literacy is something that doesn't just apply in childhood. It applies throughout the lifespan. And it's this idea that, it's defined as the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for being active for life. And it's basically this idea that you have psychological and physical components that work together to encourage you to be active, and allow you to be active. And so what I'm studying is I'm actually working with different clinics at CHEO and some of the outpatients at CHEO. So some of the kids that either have a cardiac diagnosis or live with diabetes or maybe live with a blood disorder. What are their barriers to physical activity? And physical literacy, actually. So instead of just looking at physical activity, looking at both the psychological and the physical, and what are their support systems for developing physical literacy, and are they different between groups, and are they the same? Because when you look at certain kids that might have like medically necessary physical activity restrictions, a lot of them, though they may differ as to reasons why, it might be they all need to limit, or let's say they can't push themselves, so they need to be given opportunities for rest. And the reasons might be different between the kids, but they all need opportunities to rest. So what types of physical activity environments can you provide for them that allow for that? Which might be a common barrier between them, but is also something that we can easily intervene on. And my thought is we can pool more resources when we're looking at more kids rather than focusing on specific kids. in my master's, I looked at just the cardiac clinic, which was so great, and I loved it. And then as I worked in different clinics, I was like, oh, they're very similar to the cardiac kids. Why are we not pooling resources together? So I'm actually partnering with a community organization in Ottawa to offer a multi-sport program, and I'm going to put those kids in that program and see how their physical literacy develops throughout their participation.
Okay.
And to see if it's different or the same.
So I know you kind of talked about physical literacy. Like, what are some of the components that make up what physical literacy is? Like, where do you first start picking that up? What does it mean to be physically literate? I know you kind of went through it.
The definition.
Well, yeah, like let's
break it down.
Yeah, in like practical terms. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like as a kid, like is it me like just going through life and you pick up different things from different sports, different gym
Different
classes?
experiences.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're picking up. So as a kid, you have recess. You have maybe you're walking to school every day. Maybe you're biking to school every day. Maybe on the weekends you go to the ski hill. Maybe on the weekends you play basketball. It's an accumulation of these experiences which inform how motivated you are. Because let's say they're bad experiences, you're not going to be very motivated to keep going. I can remember in childhood having a bad experience with volleyball. I didn't make a team. And that discouraged me from playing volleyball all throughout high school, even though like secretly there was part of me that really liked it still. Like I had an enjoyment for it. I thought it was still really a great sport. Because I didn't make that team in the 6th grade, it stopped me from being motivated or confident in my ability to play volleyball in high school. So, and then through that, because I wasn't motivated to play and because I wasn't confident in playing, I never actually developed the skills to play volleyball.
So you could never catch up, even if you wanted to play.
Right.
Okay.
It would take a greater amount of motivation and really get my butt into gear to do that.
Right.
Same thing for positive experiences. If you're in an environment where you're encouraged and you're praised and you're given positive feedback, you're more likely to want to do that and you feel more confident and you build the skills because you spend more time doing it. And it's not about focusing on one particular sport. I think what's important is that you should have these positive experiences in a variety of contexts. Like some organizations talk about land, like sea and air, being able to be active in all those ways.
Interesting.
So,
how would you be active in the air?
I'm trying to.
We're thinking like
too.
gymnastics.
Like gymnastics, diving.
Oh, that shit
Right?
scares me. No way.
Right. So you're not very confident for that.
Not in the air. No, I'm not a great swimmer either, but I sort of can. But
right, or like jumping and or like trampolining. Let's say, yeah, gymnastics.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's this idea of how do we become literate in our bodies, like understand ourselves, understand what we can and can't do, and manipulate our motor skills and selves to be able to be active in these different contexts. It's like kids that play multiple sports are able to just pick up one and do another without much adjustment, right?
Right.
Like if they've never tried a sport before, but they've played multiple sports and they try a new sport, they're able to adapt and learn because they're physically literate.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a huge conversation around that, and specifically hockey right now, because a lot of parents are like, you play hockey 365, your summer camps, skills coaches. There's a lot of that movement, and then there's a lot of like people be like, no, you need to play a lot of sports, like play baseball in the summer, play basketball, and like go do other things, and then come back to hockey in the fall.
Right.
It's kind of like a big debate. I don't even know if it's a big debate, but
it is.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of my committee members, like an advisor that I have on my PhD committee, he gave a presentation to a room of exercise psychology students, and he basically said hockey is a cannibal.
Oh, damn.
He went there. He said hockey is a cannibal, and it does not leave any room for anything else. It sucks all that time out of you because you're expected to do these training camps, and it research has shown it's not beneficial not only to the athlete but to the whole person, right? Because if that's your only identity is playing hockey, and then when you grow up and if you're not lucky enough to make it, because it's all luck really, lucky enough to make it to the pros, and even if you do make it to the pros and can't do it anymore, then what, right?
Yeah.
So by sampling different sports, it not only there's research that shows that it prevents injury, that it makes you a better player, but it also gives you broader life experiences that you're able to draw on as you age and as you transition out of sport.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the other? So you said you're focusing on kids, and you're going to try to get them physically literate, and like, how do you go about, instilling this stuff in children?
Right.
Because they don't even want to do their math homework, let alone like learn about all this and all the benefits. The brain's not developed enough to understand if I benefit from this, it's going to make me so much better when I'm an adult, right?
Honestly, you got to give kids for credit. They know more than you think you know. They know more than you think they know.
Interesting.
It's mind blowing.
But do you put it on the parents, the teachers, the gym teacher, the coaches, the kid? Is it are you trying to build a community system where everyone is contributing the way they're supposed to contribute to this system to grow a healthy child into a physically literate adult?
If I had 20 years to do my PhD, absolutely. That's absolutely the route you would go.
Right.
And it's a community-based, that would be a community-based project where you're really addressing all of the socio-environmental factors. It takes a village, right? What I can do is the hour that I have them in that multi-sport program, I can make sure that the coaches know effective teaching strategies, how to engage the kids. There's different strategies that you can use to engage kids and different approaches. The kids that don't want to play, there's a reason why. And if you sit down on their level and ask them, they'll be able to tell you, and you can figure out a way to get them involved based on what they're telling you.
Interesting.
You just need to ask.
Well, what are some healthy, you mentioned talking to these coaches and using things to get them, not necessarily both, the kids who do want to play and the other, but what are effective coaches techniques, right? Because a lot of the old school mentality is drill sergeant, yelling, screaming, benching, and sometimes people respond to that.
Right.
A lot of the time they don't.
Right. And that's more elite sport. Not even elite sport.
Right,
That's
okay.
more competitive sport. So the types of programs I'm interested in are the recreational ones, the non-competitive ones.
No, you got to play to win. That's how we play.
Well, you can still play to win, but you're not playing necessarily for a trophy. You can play to win within that hour.
Yeah.
Right? And you can play as a team to win, but then when you go home, that was just one good experience. You go home and it's not a part of your identity that you won that game, right? Competition is healthy. There's no reason why kids see. I'm not one to say, "Oh, don't make it make all the games non-competitive." No, but if you do have a kid that responds really poorly to that, don't emphasize the competition. You can make it, and you'll have some kids that say, "Okay, we got a point." All right, you keep track of the points. Versus as a coach, I'm not going to emphasize, this team is winning. You guys pick it up. Other team, pick up the pace. Do more. They're beating you, right? Because that's not, in a non-competitive setting, in a recreational environment, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know when you're winning.
It's true. Kids always know.
They know.
So what are some things I think a lot of people, I consider themselves, they want to be leaders, coaches, teachers. What are things that they can do that are positive reinforcements to what you're trying to teach?
Right. Bottom line, being empathetic to to the kids.
Okay. That's hard for a lot of people.
It's hard. It's hard for a lot of people with adults to
Yeah.
be empathetic.
Yeah.
And to kids especially if you don't remember what it's like being in their shoes,
Right.
being empathetic to them. And,
Yeah. I'm not to cut you off. I think
No,
I was,
it's okay.
there's an article I read, and I think I brought it up I can't remember if it was a real life conversation or a podcast, but it was like this actual, like, I wish I remember the term. I think I was talking this with Quadjo, where people have this mentality that, like, because it happened to me, you also have to go through it.
oh, yeah. No, I know what you're talking about, but I can't.
You can't either.
Yeah.
No one ever remembers
No.
the term.
No.
But it's so interesting and so
Yeah.
true, right? Like, my coach yelled at me, and
So you have to.
yeah, and
yeah.
I turned out okay. Like, that whole
Yeah.
mentality, right? And that
Right.
goes back to that empathy thing, where so many people lack it because they think that their experience has to be everyone else's experience.
Right. From a leader's perspective.
Yeah.
But then if you remember what it's like when you were that kid, how would you have preferred the situation to be handled? And as a teacher, you still have objectives. You still have teaching objectives. You still want them to learn the skills. Let's say, like, I coach multi-sport. So I still want them to learn specific skills. I want to get through the lessons. I want them to practice their social skills. And I want to play a game with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I meet those objectives while engaging a child that wants to just sit on the side, right? And it's about going back and forth. So you engage the rest of the class and you let that child sit out. And then once the rest of the class is doing the activity, you go back to that child and talk to them. Say, hey, I noticed you're sitting here. Why are you sitting down? They might shrug, and you can give them suggestions. Are you scared? Are you nervous? Do you not like this game? And if you give them suggestions, they might say, yeah, I'm scared. Okay, why are you scared? We can do it together. And it may take a little bit more time to do it with them and take that time to understand, because you might see them try to do it and you can immediately pinpoint the feedback that you can give them to make them successful.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let's say it's a soccer kick. If they're running beside the ball rather than directly behind it, let's say, you can just reposition them and say, oh, you have to be directly behind the ball. Let's start from behind the ball, take 3 steps back, and then go and kick the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's a very basic example, but by understanding, okay, they're nervous, or they're scared, or they can't do it. Okay, I can help. Here's how I'm going to help. I've had kids that don't like losing, and when they lose, they sit out. And
I used to like switch teams, or,
Right.
I didn't. Yeah,
right. And so for the kid, and honestly, switching teams is not a bad idea, right? Like, if that's to get the kid engaged, you say, okay, well, the rest of the team, first you tried to get them back to the rest of the team needs you. You guys are a team. They're also not winning. They also didn't score a point, let's say. They're also behind. But the more of you there are out there, the better you'll do. And even if you don't win a point, you're still going to try your best. And it's just using that language rather than just letting them go to the side and say, oh, they're difficult. They always do this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or yelling at them to get back here, or else you can't come back, or else you have to sit out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always punishment.
Yeah. Punishment
Because it's easy. It's
Yeah.
easier. It's less time consuming. You're in control. You assert your dominance. It's unfortunate, but
Right.
in the world we live in, especially today, it's hard to sometimes find time.
Yes.
Or the energy.
Or the energy. Oh, it takes so much energy.
Yeah. Patience.
Patience.
You had a shitty day at work. You had, you're barely making your mortgage payments, like everything's piling up, and then you have this kid who's being difficult, and I have to sit there,
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It takes a lot of conscious effort for
Yeah.
people to recognize that and do it, even though it is the right thing.
Right. And it's teaching that and showing, like, some of the coaches that I work with, when they see it, they're like, oh, that's the difference it can make. Like, I was coaching in the summer, and one of the coaches, I wasn't there the previous week, but there was a girl that she might have had a diagnosis on the spectrum. I'm not sure, but she was definitely going to the beat of her own drum, and it was soccer. And he said, oh yeah, last week I had to give her like 5 timeouts because she just wasn't listening. And I look at her and she's basically just picking daisies and harming nobody. Like, and she's not doing it maliciously. It's like, okay, well, don't give her timeouts. Just see, and maybe she wasn't doing the skill. Okay, how do you see this? And getting her perspective on it, and then saying, okay, well, this is how I see it. Do you want to do it with me? And then I'll do it like you, right? And then you're still doing it. And then she was so much more focused throughout the whole lesson because she wasn't being penalized for seeing the world in her own way.
Right.
And it didn't really take that much time out of the class.
Right.
It was like we were doing drills, and it was like, okay, half you're going to go halfway doing it the way you want to do, and then halfway doing it the way that I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's, I mean, not only in kids, but as you're saying this, like, this is just a concept people are just picking up with adults and leadership and workplace, right? Like before, again, it was that drill sergeant mentality. I'm the boss, you follow me, where it's like everyone has these truly unique needs and different ways of responding to things, and that you need to focus individually on each.
And the individual learning. Yeah. Right. It's actually so interesting that you say that, because a lot of the leadership work that's done in sport comes from like managerial leadership. Like comes from,
because it's very much the same.
The theory is the same. Yeah. It's just how you apply it might be a bit different, but it's the same.
Yeah, because you're trying to take someone and meet an objective, whether that objective is to win the game,
right,
or to get better, develop, or you're trying to take someone along and make them better in whatever it is. And that, I just always take it to hockey, and you look at someone like Mike Babcock, who just, I don't know if you even follow sports, but he went through a big thing because he went through kind of a weird psychological thing with Mitch Marner, and it came out after he got fired. Right. And people are all talking about, the coaches of when we were kids, the 90s, the 80s, the
dance teacher with a cane.
So very similar thing, right? Like, or teachers or coaches, right? As we develop and understand the psychology of humans and what's going to make them respond, to focus on that individual need and their perspective on the world and how they see things and through their experiences, very into learning about that when it pertains to mental health and how, people are depressed or anxious, and how what you're doing to them might be perceived a different way because of their illness, experience. Right?
Yeah, because of their illness.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So by doing this with kids, and you're focusing on kids, like what are you hoping to instill? Are you trying to create healthier kids?
Yes.
Are you trying to give them the tools to be healthier adults and hopefully make a better adult population?
Yes.
Like what's the goal of this kind of study? I know you said yes to everything.
All of that. Yes to all of that. Healthy people. It's about, it's hard to, with those individual kids, it's building their physical literacy. Now it might go down, and like physical literacy is one of those things, it's a lifelong journey, and it's literally a lifelong journey, and you're going to have ebbs and flows. Let's say you're even just a hockey player and you suffer a really bad concussion. That's going to mess with your motivation, your confidence, your physical competence, and then you're back to square one, and it's about developing that again. And how do you do that post-concussion, right? So that's like one example. With these kids, in this time period, I want to see, is a community multi-sport program where they're all participating, can it make a difference in their physical literacy now? If it can, then it's better setting them up for future years to understand, we do sports like fencing and curling. I played curling. I was actually pretty good at that, I remember. I'm going to try it again. Oh, I remember I had to do this. Things like that and those experiences. I played tennis, or I played badminton, and it's really similar to tennis. I think I could be good at tennis. Like, I had one participant in a focus group. He said, I like mini putt, and I'm good at mini putt, so I think I want to try golf. And it's like having that internal dialogue in their heads
Okay.
Like, oh, I have this really positive experience in this program with this sport. I want to try this sport. I want to play it next season. That's what we're hoping for, because that will bridge into, oh, I want to try this now. I want to try this. I want to try this. And then they get into adolescence and adulthood, and they keep wanting to try it from these positive experiences.
Okay, so instilling that kind of that dialogue in their own head, that basic, I guess, planting the seed.
Yes.
And then like encourage it, like watering it, growing it with encouragement and positive experience. Okay,
yeah.
I'm catching on now.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, yes, they will be healthier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially these kids that live with a chronic disease are more susceptible to developing further chronic diseases. If we can prevent that, like through physical activity, which has been shown to be a preventing factor of developing chronic disease later in life. If we can do that now, why not? Right? And another goal for me is I really want to be I want to liaise the community with the clinicians. So having the clinicians know that there's this program that they can refer their patients to if they're if they're struggling with physical activity, and having the community know how to respond to those kids that are coming from CHEO, my job's done.
Right.
If that can happen, and long term that can happen, that would be the best thing to me.
Is there a lot of dialogue with that now? Like, I'm just, because I'm not
in the
right. Like I wouldn't know. Like I was never like prescribed hockey. You know what I mean? But like what I just had Quadjuan the last episode, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of things going on in healthcare with lots of different things, and
Yes.
sometimes we do, like I mentioned on the podcast, we're more reactive than we are proactive, and what you're suggesting might be a little bit more of a proactive approach.
Yeah.
Look at us, we're already completing each other's sentences.
I love it.
But like right now, like is that conversation between doctors and patients happening, or is it something that like you're hoping that you're gonna have to really? It's a lot of work that you're gonna have to grow it.
So it is happening. They are talking. They are talking about physical activity. They are being, like, their patients are being asked about what they do. The parents are being asked what they do to stay physically active, and the clinicians are being asked by parents what should they do for physical activity, because they know it's important. So the importance of it is not lost anymore, where it might have been before. Now it's valued as important. It's more thinking, okay, what can they do? What do you recommend? So parents will have to say, what do you recommend to the clinicians? And they have so many things to remember and so many things to do.
Of course, yeah.
That they don't necessarily know what to exactly recommend. They go, and as they should, they say, oh, we'll ask your child what they like to do. What do they like to do? Okay, I can sort of say yes or no to certain things. Or if they like hockey, but they have limited endurance, okay, put them in a league where they're able to take frequent breaks. Put them in a league where the coach isn't going to push them past their limits. That would be the advice of the clinicians. But if they have a kid that they know isn't very active, like from the clinician's perspective, they know isn't very active, they don't know what activities are available to the kid. It could be as easy as saying, hey, there's this program that we know of. It's really close by. You can check it out. It's really important for your child to be active. And in this program, they're trying different activities. And we've had other kids from CHEO do it. It's an easy sort of way for the clinicians already to know that it's safe and appropriate for them. To say, hey, you need a little bit more help with your physical activity. Rather than referring them to a physical activity specialist, which is ideally if we could do that, but we don't have the money for that in healthcare. Let's put them into a community program with other kids that might be like them or might not be like them, and we know that it's good for them, and go from there.
Yeah.
That
it's kind of that conversation is a little bit of a touchy subject with some, because you get into topics like fat phobia, discrimination against fat people with doctors, because there seems to be a disconnect with doctors saying people need to be physically active and people taking that very negatively and like it's an attack on them.
Because they're thinking that's the only thing that they need to do.
Right.
To be better. Oh, to be better, you just have to be active. Where, like, and I live, breathe, eat physical activity, but I don't think that's the only thing that you need to be healthy.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I've
And
talked
if
about that with mental health. Like,
Yeah.
exercise is crucial for me, and I know for a
Right.
lot of people, and it's, again, so we have the science here. It's all here. But again, we were talking off air about Rogan and taking mushrooms and exercise to cure depression, right? Like it's
Not quite.
There's parts of it that are, but okay. So you're saying that those people perceive it as that's the only thing they can do, or the doctor's just saying, "Oh, just lose weight and you'll be fine."
No, it's not about weight at all. With these kids, it's not about, like, I'm talking
Yeah,
within this
yeah.
context. It's not about weight at all.
Okay.
It's about, they know that being active is, in addition to the treatment that they're getting, beneficial
Okay.
to their long-term
Right,
health.
Right.
So that's the conversation more that they're having. Not
Right, okay.
And it's not even in a lens to, if they see that the child is, like, let's say their BMI is off the charts or whatever. There are other clinics for that as well, to address those, like, obesity related issues that are obesity related. But it's more about just getting that child active.
Right.
Yeah.
Just strengthening.
Yeah. And I can't speak on all clinicians' perspectives
course.
because there might be some that are more inclined to talk about physical activity with kids that maybe don't look,
Fit the mold,
I'm
yeah.
air quoting now, look as physically active. But it should be that, and the recommendations are that conversation should happen with all patients. What does your physical activity look like?
Yeah.
Not
People
just-
really don't like that question. Some
Yeah.
people don't like that question,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah. And I understand why.
Yeah.
Because if that's their experience with doctors,
Look at you. Okay, the psychology's coming
past
out here.
experiences informing future thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just I don't even know if you know the answer to this, but I'm just curious.
I probably don't.
Fair enough. I'm fascinated with people who are able to push the limits of their physical capabilities.
The guy who ran a marathon under 2 hours.
Yeah, or like there's, I follow people like David Goggins, who broke the record for chin-ups in 24 hours. Like these
Yeah.
people that seem to just be able to do.
Insane thing.
I wish I remember his name, but he swam around England and like the England Island, whatever, Great Britain. He swam around it. Like
Love
these
it.
people who can push past physical limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any of that in your study, or do you have any insight on how that kind of stuff is possible? Or are you just as much in awe as I am?
That's not my line. Yeah,
Right,
I'm
okay.
just as much in awe. And some people do. So there's those master athletes that run ultra marathons.
Yeah. Courtney
Yeah.
Walter.
Yeah.
like
So, like, and there is research being done to understand their experiences and, like, how do they get to that point where they're doing that?
they have high physical literacy.
Evidently, but if it's to a point where it's detrimental to them, then
Well, that's what I
it's
mean,
not,
right? Like you hear like stories of like their feet bleeding and they just tape it up and they go running.
Yeah, but ballet dancers have their feet bleed.
True. Yeah. True. It's true.
And a bleeding foot will heal.
Yeah, it's just I've always been so fascinated how people push, right? Because sometimes like I'm in the gym, I'm like, I can literally not run anymore.
Right.
I feel like sick, but some people would be like, no, just push past it. And
But
I'm
there are
just like,
some days where you're probably like, oh, I can push a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like that balance of like,
Yeah.
keep pushing through and getting better, or am I actually going to kill myself from this
Kneel
exercise,
over
right?
and-
It's one of those,
Yeah.
I don't know, that stuff really fascinates me.
Yeah. Like how you can push yourself to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like I will never run a marathon in my life, ever, just because I know that that's not a push that I desire.
Fair enough, right? Like you
Like,
could if you wanted to.
If I
and
really
to
wanted
train,
to.
But that's not.
Yeah,
that's
it's not
my idea of
something-
fun.
I desire. I did a 10K. It was on my bucket list. I did it. I basically crawled at the end. It was a lot. I like suffered through the last half of it, but I did it. And that to me was like, that was my goal. I accomplished it. It kind of hurt, but we got through it.
Yeah.
Will I run a 10K again? Probably, because I know I can do it. Will I go for a marathon? No, because I know
Yeah.
that that's not the experience that I want.
Yeah, I hate running.
Yeah.
I ran today. I'm not a fan. I just do it.
Then don't do it.
I know, but
Then don't do it.
part of me is like, it's part of my exercise routine. One day a week,
Okay.
I will run.
Okay.
It's not everything I do. It's just I just run one day a week. Like I'll do other cardio, which is fine. I
Right.
just don't like prolonged running.
Prolonged running. But then you can do like, it's just as good to like run for 2 minutes, walk for 2 minutes, run for 2 minutes, walk for 2 minutes.
Don't tell me that. No, tell me that I have to run faster.
Okay, you have to run faster and harder. And
Don't use your psychology.
if you're
on
not
me.
puking by the end of it, you're doing it wrong.
Is just that I guess that's a really interesting point. Like, do you prioritize different forms of activity over the other? Like, obviously, you're
No.
not telling the kids to go be doing deadlifts.
No.
Like, or is like any activity? Like, this goes back to the podcast I had with Amanda, like
Yeah.
where she's just like, move. Movement's good. I'm not prescribing anything. Just move.
Right. So yes, but also some type of structure, because if they want to play a game, a sport, or a tag game or something, they have to understand how to follow rules and how to manipulate their actions to, like in basketball, you're not allowed to just take the ball and run,
Right.
right? You have to know how to dribble. And you should be able to play pickup basketball if that's what you want to do, and know how to play. So it's about introducing structure and knowledge as well. So in the program that I have, or that I'm doing, the first 5 minutes are just free play. Just move, just grab whatever ball you want, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
move.
I remember that in gym
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
You can shoot.
You
the
can
hoops
shoot, you
or
can
kick
run
it against the wall.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
walk around, whatever you want to do. We'll play some music and you can do whatever you want to do. And then after that, you start to learn, okay, this is like in badminton, we were learning or was teaching just volleys over, like rallies. And we have balloons instead of birdies, and it's just a little bit more fun for the kids. And it's like, okay, just try to get over the net. If you can't get over the net, that's fine. Get it on the racket and start manipulating it through space, right? Giving them a goal and giving them different levels to achieve that goal, and they pick which ones they want to go to. So there's choice still in there. I think that's a big thing with teaching, is still giving choice. Like, there's structure, there's a goal, but the child or the individual, you go to the gym, you still have a choice of what you want to do. Right? That goes a long way. And then you're building towards certain goals and certain skills and fitness. Because yes, it is good for them to just, and like, especially kids, as we talked about in the beginning, they innately just want to play. But we also want them to have the skills to play with their friends that are playing a basketball game outside, or their friends that are swimming in the pool if they're playing Marco Polo, or like, we still want them to be able to join in on those experiences and have the skills to do that and the confidence to do that. Right. So that's more what it's about. But yes, what she was saying about just going and moving, from a motivational perspective, if you're not doing anything, is better than nothing.
Right.
And from your perspective, it's don't push yourself past the limit where you're not going to enjoy it. Right? Like, if you don't enjoy running, but you value it, okay, then run. Because you obviously do. If it's part of your routine, like, you value it, you might not enjoy it, and maybe you'll get to a point where you'll enjoy it. Or not.
Yeah.
So then you're talking about different, like, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and sources of motivation. So that's
a beautiful segue, because I wanted to talk to you about motivation next, because that was one of the true fascinating things when you sent me the notes of things you could talk about.
Yeah.
Because that's the one, like, everybody
needs help with.
Yeah, right? Like, it is hard to find motivation sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'll sit in we have a gym here. I go to Good Life now, but I used to, like, sit in my office for, like, 45 minutes, just being like, I'm going to go. I know I'm going to go, but I'm just like, I'm not ready yet.
Right.
How am I going to go? All right,
Right.
let's go. I'll watch maybe an inspiring video on YouTube or Instagram, or I'll listen to a song, or I'll just try to,
Right.
okay, let's go. Let's do it. Right. Like,
How do you motivate yourself?
what makes like, how do we even It's a big question. Motivation is a big thing.
Yeah. So there's different types of motivation too.
Oh, perfect.
So,
I'm glad that you just picked off on there.
Yeah. Yeah. So somebody that just loves running for no particular reason, it's a part of them. That's more intrinsic
Psychopaths,
motivation.
yeah. Just kidding.
Yeah, those people. That's a source of intrinsic motivation, and that is a part of them. Then there's types of extrinsic motivation, and it's a range, and it starts from like truly extrinsic, like you're going to get a prize for
Right.
You're going to get something tangible out of running for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get a tangible chocolate bar for running for 20 minutes, but you won't get that if you don't run for 20 minutes. Okay. Then there's a type of extrinsic motivations like, I know it's good for me, so I'm going to do it because I know it's good for my health, let's say. Or I know if I run, then I can eat whatever I want. Or so I know it's good for me. And I know I should be doing it, so I'm going to do it. Those types of motivation are not long lasting.
What?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I
They're
fall
not.
totally under that other one.
Which is fine because it's like that ebb and flow too. So they're not long lasting. And then there's the closest one to intrinsic motivation, and now I'm like totally blanking.
Okay, let's go back on your notes here.
Yeah, in my giant head. Ideas. Ugh, and I wrote my comps on this. This is so embarrassing. Yeah, so it's close to intrinsic motivation, where it's not innately a part of you. So let's say you had a friend that you ran with, that you enjoy spending time with that friend, and that time is running, so you're going to run. But because you enjoy spending time with that friend, that's why you run, because the only time you get to see that friend is when you run, let's say. So it's still a form of an extrinsic motivation, but it is more aligned with enjoyment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm doing so poorly. I should just
Because you're hanging out with
fail.
you're hanging out with your friend. You just happen to be running.
Right. And that's what you do. So like if you go to a gym where like they know your name and you know, oh, they're gonna like I'm accountable to them. But also I really like that feeling of when they welcome me to the gym. That's a really good feeling. Or I really like fitting in these clothes. Or I really like that I don't need a puffer when I go up the stairs at work, right? Like things like that. Those are things that you enjoy about being active, not necessarily the action itself.
So that's the key to motivation in a way, that you need to somehow tie some sort of enjoyment
to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's not already intrinsically enjoyable to you. And there's nothing wrong with extrinsic sources of motivation. Research just shows that they aren't long lasting for behavior change. So if we were to like put you in an exercise intervention, and we were to use more external sources of motivation, if we were to follow up with you 6 months later, the likelihood of you adhering to that would be really low.
Right. But possible.
But possible.
Right.
But possible. Yeah.
Because when you first said it, so I really fall under the, I know it's good for me.
Right.
Now,
right.
Yeah, I do like the way I feel after, and
Yeah.
that's why I do it. But then when you brought in the next part, it's like, you kind of, I like seeing body change, and that
Right.
brings me enjoyment.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, my arms are a little
Yeah.
bit bigger. Oh, the jeans are a little looser.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay. But like for the last, like I made a change December 29th, 2017, where I was like,
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I'm going to go to the gym now,
Yes.
and that is now going to be a part of me.
Right.
And I've just been doing it ever since.
Right.
It first started with dating, because I was like, I'm going to get so like buff and
All the
all
girls are
that,
gonna want
and
me.
it didn't. Still not quite there. Like that's another, when we talk about exercise, just to transition a little bit, like that can be a big thing that like deflates motivation, right? Because you think that those gains are going to come quickly, and when they're not, it's incredibly deflating. And we basically have a whole health industry that relies on you giving up.
Well, that's part of the reason why those extrinsic sources of motivation aren't long lasting.
Right.
Because if that's what you're relying on, you're not necessarily or you're going to plateau and you're not going to see that. So why are you going to continue if that's your only source of motivation? Like, I'm sure that you have, like, you might think, yeah, that's why I do it. But there are other aspects of it that.
Yeah, you just got to think about it a little bit.
Yeah,
why am I
that you might not be aware of, right?
Yeah.
Might be, oh, like I actually feel really good. And that is a great source of motivation when you do it and you feel really good. And that goes back to what I'm talking about with the kids. When we put them in a program and they're successful and they feel really good doing it and they get that encouraged, they get that high five from the coach, then it's like, oh, this is good. I like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that could carry into motivation to do it again. Right. And it's still more extrinsic. And then you get the kids that come in, live, breathe, eat hockey, love hockey, and it's just a part of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different. They don't necessarily need that same kind of encouragement where the kids that are unsure about it are.
Mm-hmm.
But same goes for adulthood. Those people that you see in the gym that it's just their natural habitat and they just love it and they enjoy it. They just intrinsically enjoy it. I think those are very few and far between, though.
I find it really interesting. So when I think about things broadly, I'm sure if I went into at least a little more in depth in my life, things might change a little bit. But when I think about it broadly, I always responded much more to failing, to negativity, to responding to that adversity. And I'm not saying that as like an egotistical thing. Like, so like I would get cut from the competitive team.
Right.
And I'd be like, fuck you, coach. I'm going to work harder and I'm going to show you up. And then the next year, come back to try out some better, get cut again. Well, you know what, right? My whole life, and that's probably not a healthy way to live life sometimes, but I've always fed off of the negativity. For the most part, when I was positively encouraged, I would kind of take it for granted. And I would be like, oh, whatever, coach loves me. I'm not going to work as hard today or whatever. I'm going to take a little bit off.
Right.
But when I would get, not necessarily like yelled at him, but like when something would not go my way, that would motivate. I'd be like, oh, hell no.
Right.
Now we're going to go.
Right.
Like, where does that fall into this whole
motivation
or psychology or like, because what we were talking about, right, we're boosting kids and giving them tools, right? But there are a lot of people who respond
the way that you described.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's those kids that you're like, I know you're better than this. So show me you're better than this.
Okay.
And then when they do better, it's like, that's it. And like recognizing that, oh, okay, like I do have to push myself. Because I have told kids before, nope, not good enough. I know you're better. I'm not afraid to tell kids that. Because if I know that they're better than that, I know that they're better than that. And if I've told them that before. It's not coddling. And I think that's sort of where it gets sort of lost. Because if you provide an environment that's just like, oh, great job, great job, great job. Everyone's doing so well. But you know those kids that are sort of like, yeah, I know, I'm great. They're not pushing themselves.
Right.
You say, nope, I know you can do better.
So it's like a big balancing
act. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And when you work with a lot of different types of kids, you can start to recognize which ones are which.
Yeah, once you're familiar with them, you can pick up on them for sure.
Pick up on them. And then the kids that are daisy pickers because they just live in their own world, and the kids that are actively not listening to you because they want to start shit. Those kids exist too.
Oh yeah, my
kids.
brother's one of those. Like just deliberately causing shit just because he can.
Yeah, because he can. And that's not where I would be like, oh, so how are you like? No, that would be a kid where I'm like, nope, you don't get this. We do this. We like lay down the law. So it's you kind of have to, and just we were talking about individual differences. You have to adapt the individual differences, and like that goes for kids that are 3 years old that I work with, and kids that are not kids, young adults that are 19, 20 years old that I work with too as a TA. So like that understanding different individual personalities and how you adapt to that. Yeah.
So, I mean, where do you get so I know obviously you're studying your PhD, so you have a lot of knowledge, right? But
that's not really where my knowledge, well.
But I just mean like, where you're drawing on the research, right?
Right.
Like on the studies, on what works and what doesn't work, and you're trying to apply that to coaching.
But I also draw on my personal experience.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I can't, if we were to draw on the research, like research is fantastic. Research is necessary. Research is really well done when it's really can be really well done. But it's important to draw on personal experience as well. Like I'm a big proponent of that because if we just looked at the science and the numbers and we can't explain why people are outliers and fall outside of that, but we can by personal experience, then why wouldn't we use that anecdotal experience?
Right. It just makes me think of like the person with like the parenting book and being like the kid's like screaming, like throwing everything. And you're like,
Appendix
it says
B.
if we go down and speak at his level empathetically, he's going to respond. How are you like, yeah! You know, like kids are very to just sit there and you're right. Like,
so I think the research that I do has given me like more backing to the experience,
right.
like to the work that I do in the field, right? Like the coaching and the teaching work. Then I'll often encounter things that conflict with the research that I find, and then I have to learn a way to adapt. And that happens too, where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that because that's not what I read, and that's not what statistically is known as. So it's both. So then what are other things that I can draw on? Or what do I know about myself and this person? And how can I adapt? And like, even I've had classes where one strategy works and then the next class, and they might not seem any different, but the same strategy doesn't work.
Right.
But research helps us sort of define those strategies, understand where our efforts need to be placed more. Talking about from a mental health perspective, understanding what's highly detrimental versus what's supportive. And then sort of working within that. Yeah.
What do you think the future of this, like what you're trying to do? Like, is there a lot of like community support, government support? Is there a lot of people trying to implement this type of change? Or because I remember talking with Nina on a previous podcast, she's getting into like workplace mental health, which is not really related. I was like, how many people are studying that? She's like, like kind of like 3. I'm like, oh damn, okay. Like, has this been a push for a long time? Is this more of a relatively new thing? Like, what's kind of like, if you could say semi-realistically what the future of this is, where do you think it's going?
So within the past 10 years, Canada especially has sort of been a leader.
Right.
If we're talking about physical literacy stuff.
Yeah.
Policy-wise, so in government policy, in sporting organizations, national sporting organizations and their grassroots, like Hockey Canada and their grassroots programs, physical literacy is talked about. They talk about it in the terms of long-term athletic development. So it's a little bit different, but there is a push to get it known by the coaches. But the knowledge translation piece of it, I think personally, is lacking. Like, I don't think that what it's truly about is getting conveyed effectively. So I think there's a lot more work to do there. Teachers are starting to learn about it more in schools with regards to physical education specialists as well. Those exist. But there is actually a lot of people doing research in it, and like Participation Action, Sport for Life, these organizations. It's the background behind what they promote. Because if you think about physical literacy, it's all those, like, it's a pretty wide concept, right? And it's the background which is informing everything that they're promoting, which is physical activity. It's the background that you need to be active. So they're targeting healthcare. They're targeting, so that's a new conversation. Like how physical literacy impacts health is a brand new conversation. Little research has been done about it. Some models have been proposed. It's not something I feel like very comfortable talking about because there are clear links with how physical activity impacts health, and you can make assumptions, but like it's just not quite there yet.
Right.
So the future does lie there, because we can talk about physical literacy in so many different lights. Like,
it's a very big.
Yeah.
in like layman's terms, like how would you just I know we kind of did, but just like really just like as simplistic as possible. Like it's just understanding why
having the physical and mental skills to be active in your life.
Right.
And active doesn't mean necessary. Like it is physically active, but physically active doesn't mean sport or going to the gym. Like physically present is even physically active.
Okay.
You know?
So when you say like, okay, so like,
okay, that was broadening it too much.
no, it's okay. No, I'm just like, so like when it gets funneled down to say the grassroots hockey coach, and it's like they're talking about physical literacy more now, which is good. What are they like? What's that like first? Like what are they saying when you talk about they're teaching physical literacy to kids? Like what is that first
step?
Yeah, like it's just like, hey, like if you learn this, it's like it's good. Like what, like just.
It's more the conversation of if we want to build long-term successful athletes, we have to start here.
Okay.
If we want to build long-term successful human beings, we have to start here. And fostering these physical and mental components in our grassroots hockey program. So building their motivation, building their motor skills, building their hockey skills. And from a fundamental basic level and up,
right.
That's how we're, as an organization, are going to help them develop their physical literacy.
Right. Okay. Because I was like picturing like, okay, class, we're going to talk about physical literacy today.
That's not,
Yeah. Okay. So it's like
no.
a very much a very large encompassing process.
Yeah.
Got you.
But it's about not discounting, not only looking at one side. It's not only looking at their hockey skills, right? It's looking at, okay, do they know what? Do they know why they have to do these skills in certain contexts? And so that's the knowledge piece. And are they going to feel confident doing this in a game? Are they going to feel motivated to do this when they have the puck? Right? Like, how do we teach them to do those things? So it's more from the coach's perspective of like sort of ticking off this list. Okay, we taught them this skill. We're going to make sure that they're motivated to do it and know when to use it. Done.
Right.
Moving on.
Perfect.
That's a very simplistic way of looking
at
it.
No, I love it because I'm really just trying to conceptualize. Like, so you've explained and I kind of get it, but what does that look like in practice? Like when we're talking about like that first day, people are like, but I get it now. Like it's instilling, which what hockey coaches do. They instill the fundamentals, right?
Right.
1 foot over the other.
Right.
First you do the skate with the puck or the stick with the puck before you're learning how to do a big deke slap shot thing.
Exactly.
And you build it slowly but surely along the way to get them to a point.
And it's not just focusing on the skill itself. It's focusing on the mental components that are going to allow that kid to perform the skill.
Really interesting stuff. Yeah.
It's really confusing.
Are you almost done?
My PhD?
Yeah.
No. No. I'm like halfway there.
How long does it take for a PhD?
4 to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
I'll be more 5 years. Yeah, I've been in school for a decade. Like a full decade now since I moved to Ottawa. I've been in school. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So
it's a lot of school.
It's a lot. But it's like I love learning. Like I love learning. And I love teaching. Like those are my two passions, so I'm very well aligned.
I'm with you. Like I've always been. I love learning. Like
That's
I love
why you
knowledge.
have this show.
Well, exactly right, and I can hear it firsthand and like ask the questions firsthand, and I love listening to podcasts and I love reading and all that. It's just I didn't find a lot of success learning in the school setting. Yeah. Like I would find something interesting. Like I loved history. I wouldn't really like learning about it in school, but like we would talk about ancient Egypt, and then I'd go to Google and Wikipedia, and I'd like spend hours reading on that.
And that's what graduate school is. It's like you have a particular area of interest and you research it on your own.
Yeah.
And like it's really your own self-guided learning. And then you're doing this project that's your own, that's based on your own interest. And it's less about learning what the prof is telling you to learn and more about asking questions that you're actually interested in answering.
Interesting. Okay. That's a good way to put it.
Thanks.
Maybe I should have went and did that. Not.
Maybe not. Like it's honestly not for everyone. I'm not saying it's not like it's a lot.
Yeah. I don't have the time
It's
and
no,
energy to do it.
and money too. Like,
Right.
not paid well. Like, paid, not paid well.
But you are involved in some other things.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting.
I wear lots of hats.
Yeah, we mentioned off the top. You're involved with the dating app world
Yeah.
in capacities.
Very, very small bit, but yes.
But I find it interesting.
Yeah.
Because thank God I'm not involved with the dating
Me neither.
anymore.
Like the actual dating part.
Like, yeah, like that was a headache and a half and years of heartbreak and distraughtness and deflated ego. And,
I ate a lot of peanut butter in those years.
Yeah, right.
Gave me comfort.
Is it getting better?
What?
Is the dating world getting? I know you're not in it, but like
No.
your
But from my
perception-
perspective of being in that world a little bit and the initiatives that they're putting out, I don't know if it's getting better, but there are more areas to connect with people.
right?
And there are more opportunities to connect with people, I think, now more than ever before. And I think people have to stick with what they enjoy and talk about what they're passionate about, and they will find people that catch their vibe.
Yeah, no,
Like-
it's
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
There's more ways to connect with people.
That was
now, I
always
think.
my like number one question. I ask in interviews. I used to ask them when I was dating. Like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And people were like, "Oh, well, traveling." I'm like, "No, like, what's your passion?"
Well, travel.
You know, like,
Yeah.
what lights your soul on fire?
Right.
And I remember one time some girl's like, "Wow, that's a really deep psychological question." And
Why
she
not?
I was like, "Okay."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why
Okay.
not?
Guess that wasn't good. I don't know. Like,
But people don't want to be vulnerable off the top either,
it's true.
right? Like you build a profile on a dating app. How vulnerable are you really going to be on that profile? Not very. You're going to put this more superficial
Yeah.
version of yourself, and it might be
That's a good point.
world traveler. Like love puppies, live, laugh, love.
Everyone was
you
the
know?
same. Yeah.
It's the
But,
same.
like-
But if you can be authentic, but not necessarily vulnerable,
And play the game and
but authentic at the same
Yeah.
time, right? Like, then I think that there's a lot of opportunities to connect. With
yeah.
people.
See, like I'm one of those people that just like right off the bat, like I just want to get to know you. I don't want to
Yeah.
like do the song and dance.
No.
Like and that's why like my now girlfriend and I like we've been dating just over a year. We talked about stuff you are not supposed to talk about on the first date.
That's okay.
But it worked, and
Yeah.
like that's what I wanted, and that's
Yeah.
what she wanted, and it
Right.
worked. Now I
Right.
almost blew it trying to ask her out again because I was a bumbling idiot. But that's besides the point. The date was great.
She's gonna listen to this and laugh probably.
Oh yeah, she tells that story any chance she gets. So that's fine.
But the date,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, but that would have like set a lot of people off.
But you're on this. Then that means it's good. It's a good connection because you're actually on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people that were like the person that blocked you, to me silly, but to maybe another guy, it's like, oh yeah, that is a deep personal question. I would feel more comfortable asking that way down the line, and she would be like, okay, and then
yeah,
that
everyone
more
has
aligns.
that person. And,
everyone
yeah.
has what they're looking for, right? Like
Yeah.
I have a similar situation where like the person that I'm with was like right off the get go, full steam ahead. Kind of
Yeah,
thing.
you know,
let's just bear it all out.
I don't want to talk for
Yeah.
2 weeks and then add you on. Like, let's just go on a date. We'll go in a public place, just chat,
Yeah,
whatever, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. And like, let's just see if it's worth taking anywhere.
right.
But some girls are like, no, like, not ready to yet. Like, to give you my number, let's talk for 2 weeks and then
That's a
add
bit
you on
like-
Snapchat,
yeah.
right? Like, everyone has their own game, which is fine. Again, based on past experience.
Yeah, and like that could, based on past experience, they had a really
Yes.
negative.
Absolutely.
They went, okay, I'm gonna meet this guy, or they've been told, don't do that because someone they know has had a really negative
Yes.
experience, and it's really hard from the girl's perspective. And I think now there's knowledge out there, and there are apps out there that put more power to the girl, without like yeah, like without putting all the power to the girl. It's just
I
like a
mean,
little bit more. I don't know.
I know it's, in my experience with people I know, and I know this is not always the case because there's obviously dominant men and domestic abuse and all those things. So I know it's not, in a lot of my circle, in my experience, women have all the power. Like, women control sex, which in turn, like, controls the power of the relationship.
Right.
And I just...
But why does that have to control the power of the relationship?
Because that's what guys want.
Yeah,
right? And
but
they know it.
That's what they maybe want on top of other things,
Yes.
right?
But it's just... You bring up a good point, because not one size fits all.
Right.
Everyone's different. But, like, just in my experience, in my circles, women are always kind of like the controller of...
And some women might think, yes, I am.
The conversation
Yeah.
of the marriage, of the date, of the relation, like, whatever it is. Women are a lot more dominant than I think they give themselves credit for sure.
Women that are in spaces where they're allowed to be or feel like they are
Fair
empowered
enough.
to be, right? And
But do you think dating hasn't... Because
I don't know.
maybe that they can't necessarily... They're put down maybe at work, or... like they're not allowed to be them true selves. Like, do you think maybe there's an aspect of, like, well, I can kind of play men, and, like, that makes me feel good, and
Maybe.
there's
for
a little
some.
bit of that.
Maybe
I mean,
for
again,
some.
it's really hard to
And-
put generalities because
and
everyone's so different.
Do you know what? I think the same could be said about some men. Like,
Oh,
we're gonna,
for sure.
right?
Men are... I
Some
do not
men-
subscribe to the hashtag men are all trash, because I find that very offensive.
No.
But yeah, there was a lot of shitty dudes.
Yeah.
And I'm very okay with saying that.
Yeah. So I think that, of course, there are women that manipulate their power, like they have guys at the like tip of their fingers kind of thing, and then at the same time there are guys, and like I just don't subscribe to those types of people. Those
Yeah.
are not the people I wish to build relationships with. Right?
The last time I talked about, like, dating on the podcast, I was single. So it was a while ago, one of the earlier episodes. But one of the things that I always had trouble kind of, like, grappling with is, and it was during the whole, like, Me Too movement, and it's that, you know, like, I don't want to rely on my phone just to talk to girls.
Right.
But I also have to be sensitive with, sometimes I can't just be nice to a woman and approach her in a public setting.
Right.
Trying to be as innocent as possible, right? Like,
I've had that happen before. It's unsettling.
I know, and a lot of women are uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
you know, rightfully so.
Right.
Right. Like, most of the time, the people who come up and talk to you, you do not want them coming up to talk to you. I get it.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious of that, but it was always a big, you know, frustration as, like, I consider myself a nice guy for the most part, and I'm like, I just want to talk and be civil, right? But it's so frustrating. Like,
Yeah.
in your experience, do a lot of girls, like, because I'm sure, like, most people don't want to make that connection through their phone.
No.
They want to make it
But
in
it's
real
safer.
life. And that's basically what it comes down to.
I think
right?
that's what
Like,
it comes down to. It's
Prioritizing
more safe.
safety over
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
It's so unfortunate. It
I
makes
know.
me sad.
I hate society. that
Seriously.
we've- Yeah. Yeah, it's safer. It's like a comfort blanket. And so what I like is the dating apps that bring these experiences to the real world.
Okay.
So you can find like meetups and like group events that the dating apps will sponsor to get people to meet IRL, right?
Aren't those just, like, filled with a bunch of dudes, though?
No.
Really,
Oh my gosh,
eh?
all the
Okay.
ones that I've been to. There was one that I been to was a part of. Like I worked for them, but for this particular event, it was mostly women, and then there was this really chilled dude. You could tell he was like maybe a little bit socially, like, not one to
Right.
be very confident in social situations, but he came because he heard about it through the app. And he sat down with a group of girls that he hadn't met previously and was so nice and made new friends. Maybe it will turn into something else, but he had that opportunity to make connections.
Yeah, shout out to
Through-
that dude, because
yeah.
that's making yourself very vulnerable.
Right, which not everyone is comfortable doing.
Yeah.
But then there was also an event where we were like doing things. So it's not like, let's just mingle. there was also like an objective. We were actually making because like the shoe boxes, the shoebox project, which is a fantastic initiative. But we were doing that, so there was an activity, and it was still an opportunity to meet. So like I think more dating apps are recognizing, hey, we need to get out of our safety blankets behind our phones and put these experiences out into real life connections.
But still doing it in a safe public environment.
In a safe public environment.
Yeah.
Where they know, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of success from them? Obviously, you don't get follow-ups, but
I don't know.
It'd be interesting. I would really be interested in figuring out that statistic.
Yeah. From the people that I talked to, the experience itself of that one event is always positive.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's been multiple events, and like that's the capacity that I've worked for dating apps, but it's always been positive, and it's never like it's a fun afternoon or it's a fun evening, going to yoga, doing something like that, right? And so I don't know long term, but I think it's one of those opportunities where, like you said, you might not feel comfortable approaching somebody, but if you're all in an event and you all came to the event because you all found it on the dating app,
right? Yeah,
you might feel more inclined to be like, hey, you look really interesting. I noticed
you look really interesting.
You look super interesting. I noticed, like, do you do yoga a lot? Like, do you come here? Like, let's say if it's a yoga event,
yeah, or
like, I don't know, we do a lot of fitness events, but if it's a boards games night, oh, have you played this one before? Like, do you want to play a board game with me? Right? Like, that's creating a connection in real life that's still within an environment that's meant to not be super vulnerable and unsafe.
Right. Do you ever do speed dating?
I would never. Oh, well, I've never done it. Sorry, but I think, and I'm not single at all. Like very not single, but I think when I was single, I considered it. I was like, that might be interesting.
Yeah,
but what stopped me
Old
was
school.
like, what kind of creeps go speed dating?
Well, that's what, my perception. And again, I've never been to any of these events. Just like my perception would be like it would be like a dating app where it's just a bunch of dudes.
And see, like, I don't think that it would. I don't know.
It's interesting, but like conversely, as you're saying it, like this does give an opportunity to women to come out and meet people, but in like a safer spot.
Space, yeah.
Like you're not at the club getting
Yeah.
like grinded up on by like some drunk dude.
So fun.
Yeah, like or
Miss those days.
yeah, like it's more like like the opportunities there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the.
I hope I never have to
online-
go to one, but
Likewise. Likewise. Oh gosh. No, but what I like about it is that it's making connections in the community, and making connections with people that are not necessarily within your circle. Because let's say you move to a new place, like how are you going to meet people? Right?
yeah, it's true.
It's so hard, and online platforms give us a space to do that. And it's nice when these online platforms also provide in real life opportunities to do that.
Yeah, like I've met friends like just from Twitter.
Right.
Like
Right. Oh, Twitter, the
friends.
Twitterverse.
Yeah,
So
like there's just
awesome.
people like there's people
Yeah.
I've never met who I will talk with every single day.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not every day, but
But like
regularly.
regularly. Like people that you catch up
Yeah.
with. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's interesting how that has become just like a norm.
A norm.
Where before that was like a super nerdy thing.
Well, and I think that it's just a different way of communicating. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then you also have friends that you never, like, I don't know. I have friends that I never text, but I only catch up with in real life. And that's like where our friendship thrives rather than those friends
Right.
that I
Yeah,
text
yeah,
all
yeah.
the time, right?
I'm much more of a face-to-face person.
Yeah, in general, I am too.
It's, like I always think that like I can make anyone be my friend as soon as I meet them. Like it's easier for me to
You're
talk to people.
approachable.
I try to be. I'm warm. I'm a balding ginger. Like what's threatening about me? But like that's why this podcast for now at least it's probably going to branch out into some virtual stuff. But like I just wanted it face to face and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
make a genuine friendly connection with somebody and hear their life story and what lights them on fire. And then it's it's fun. It's good.
And I also
makes
love
me
that it's
feel good.
local. Like it's all because it's face to face. It's all people.
So far, yeah.
So far, right? Like
But
it's
there's
nice.
so many cool people in Ottawa doing so many cool things, and like all you have to do is kind of look, like, yeah, like I'm in talks now to start
branching out
a little bit,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like I will always have that aspect of people in Ottawa, or at least passing through Ottawa, coming
Right.
to chat because, we, like you said, like coming to Ottawa, we said it off mic, but that you loved it here, and there's
I love it here.
again like there's people doing amazing things, and all you have to do is just kind of like put a little word out.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Casey. Shout out to Casey again. She gets all the
Hi,
shout outs.
Casey.
But who connected us. She's like my number one fan
Yes.
with like connecting people
Love
to me,
Casey.
which is amazing.
I love
Like
Casey.
she'll be like send me screenshots. Hey, I reached out to this person, but I think you guys should meet. You should be on your podcast. It'd be great. I'm like, okay, sweet.
She messaged me and I was like, sick. That's awesome. Thanks for thinking I'm an interesting person.
Well, you are. You're,
Thanks.
again, when you're in the moment and you're studying and you're in your circle of people who are doing the same thing, maybe you don't think it's interesting. But for me, who's totally outside the scope of all this, like I find it really interesting.
Thanks.
And that like it's an important field to study, and that a lot of good can come from it. So never sell yourself short.
That's a big problem as a graduate student.
It's
Like,
a big problem.
I think with everyone, yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is
syndrome.
huge.
Very real.
I'm like, wait, like people are listening to my podcast. People want to hear me speak about mental health. What? People want to nominate me for awards? Like I'm just like,
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I didn't win, but that's
yeah,
okay.
no, but that a nomination is
it meant a lot.
Yeah.
Never do anything for awards
that,
or anything, but
extrinsic motivation.
but it's always nice that people see your work and
Yeah.
what you're at least trying to accomplish, and
Yeah.
you get a little that positive reinforcement. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's always nice, but
And I
there's
love
always
that
next
a
year.
mutual friend connected us too, because I think that sort of speaks to the connections and
absolutely
knowing people from different walks of
and
life.
like look out now because I'm a big connector. So now that I know what you do,
Holla.
where does that fit in my life of people who are doing things?
Holla.
So, yeah,
And
anyway.
and same, like if you need, I know people from different walks of life. If you are
100%.
interested.
We're
Yeah.
going to talk as soon as
Yeah.
this mic. I always give people an opportunity to plug something. So I don't know
Oh.
if you have anything personal you want to plug. If there's a participation or any of these great
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah.
I know most people have like a social or something, but
Okay.
you get to plug whatever you're like. This is your time.
I think it's just I'm like, nothing specific because I'm not recruiting for anything right now. So we recruit for studies. So if you're ever approached to like participate in research, do it.
Interesting. Okay.
You might learn something. It'll be a good experience.
And you're helping people.
You're helping people, and it's you probably will learn something if you're asked to participate in research, and also get outside,
Get active.
get active. Yeah, like and do something you enjoy. I think because I don't have anything necessarily for myself to plug.
But when you write this like big book on all the stuff we're gonna have to learn.
yeah, my dissertation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all the things.
You're gonna send a copy and we're all gonna read it and
Oh my
figure out
God.
everything you learned.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big
You
document.
look stressed.
See, like this is what I'm pulling. I'm literally pulling my hair out.
That's bad. Don't do that.
No, like I would say go out and find something that you enjoy doing that's active and gets you connected to your community. Boom. That's
Better words cannot end this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.